This is Whisper from History, where forgotten voices rise again. If you missed our 32-episode Season 1, Dark History, watch the full playlist on our channel. In the silent deserts of Arizona, something waits, always quiet, always watching. Sometimes when the wind rises and the dust begins to dance, old buildings whisper their stories once more. They say there was a town, Millhaven, buried beneath the waters long ago. But one day, that town breathed again and the world witnessed its return. Tonight, we journey into the grains of that forgotten sand, where a lost settlement defied even death itself, and the truth was far deeper than what eyes could ever see. Stay with us because tonight, we're about to uncover the oldest secret of the Arizona desert. In the shimmering heat of an Arizona summer, the desert seems endless, flat expanses of sand, scrub brush, and the occasional dry wash that only flows when storms gather in distant mountains. But amid that stillness, something stirs. A wind kicks up dust, swirls across a forgotten road, and the outline of old buildings emerges then fades. It was in 1962, when heavy rains struck the Salt River Basin upstream, that the waters began to rise. Rumors spread. A town that had vanished decades ago might be returning. Locals first thought it a trick of the light, mirage, a memory. But people who knew said, no. Something was reappearing beneath the floodwaters. The town was named Millhaven. Once, in the early 1900s, it had been a copper and silver mining hub, bustling, noisy, sharp edges everywhere, people chasing the promise of riches. A boomtown. But by 1924, the mines were played out, markets crashed, copper prices collapsed, folks drifted away. The post office shut its doors. Houses decayed. Millhaven became another ghost swallowed by the desert. Then came the dam. Construction began in 1947, Salt River Dam. They called it originally, though the name changed with each proposal, each funding bill. By 1955, the dam was finished. It held back the waters of the Salt River, creating a large reservoir to provide water and hydroelectric power for Phoenix and surrounding communities. The map was redrawn. The plain where Millhaven once sprawled was to lie underwater permanently. Millhaven didn't disappear cleanly. Folks dragged what they could westward, salvaged tools, timber, bricks. Some buildings were burned, some left to rot. The town site was flooded. Water rose slowly, covering foundations, filling rooms, laps up windowsills. Once submerged, Millhaven slept. For 40 years, the reservoir held silence. Occasional divers reported walls beneath the murky surface, broken hearths, cemeteries that stood on small knolls, just above water level. Boats passed overhead. Water flickered through windows. But no one saw Millhaven whole until the drought. Late in 1961, Arizona entered one of its worst droughts on record. Snowpack in the mountains failed. Rainfall was scant. Reservoirs dropped. By mid-1962, the water level in the lake's salt had shrunk dramatically, nearly 2/3 below its usual summer mark. Exposed were things not seen in decades. The first to notice was an old man, Jasper Holt. He'd lived near Millhaven as a boy. He liked to fish from his small boat whenever the season allowed. One morning, he rode up near the old dam inlet and saw a chimney. Not just any brick stack. His memory said it was the cookhouse chimney of Miller and Sons mine. He blinked. He thought his eyes played tricks. But there it was. Red brick, blackened at the top by smoke, long burnt out. Word spread. Millhaven partially restored ran headlines in the Phoenix Gazette. Tourists came, explorers with cameras. Some came with grief. Families seeking to touch the crumbled stones of their ancestors' homes. What was reappearing weren't whole buildings, more like whispers of them. Foundations, cellars, staircases half washed away, doorways where the water line had graced the lintel. Wood frames rotted, but skeletons remained. Nails rusted, floors gone, the ghost of a flooring pattern etched in dust and dried mud. Glass shards in windows, rusted tin roofs peeled away. One house stood almost intact, a two-story with a porch. It used to belong to the Harpers. The children had danced on that porch, the Harpers used to say. Now, the railway engineer's office appeared, a small building with a bay window overlooking the rails that once carried ore cars. Locomotive tracks themselves were largely gone, washed away or carried off by scavengers and flood. Yet rails near the shuttered loading platform emerged, twisted and warped. In the local diner at Willow Creek, old-timers gather and speak in low voices. "I saw my grandfather's window today," one says. "Still got the red shutters," another replies. Faces wrinkle, eyes moist. A woman in her 70s remembers baking bread in that house's kitchen. She wants to see the fireplace one last time. But the town's reemergence brought more than nostalgia. There was danger. The reservoir, when full, had sealed away chemicals left behind by mining: arsenic, lead, copper, leachate. When the water receded, dust carried those toxins. Health concerns rose. Wildlife long adapted to aquatic habitat suffered from sudden exposure. The muddy flats exposed skeletons of trees, carcasses of fish. Birds circled overhead waiting for food or refuge. Archaeologists began arriving. They mapped out walls with theodolites. They drew blueprints from memories and shards. In the lecture halls of the University of Arizona, students pored over old maps, surveyors' records from 1903, mining company logs, census data. They tried to reconstruct Millhaven floor by floor, room by room. One such student found letters in the county archives. A woman, Clara Evans, writing to her sister in San Francisco in 1905. She describes a cold winter when one of their miners died in the tunnel collapse. She describes the sound of cave-in, the trembling earth, the tears, the children crying in the night. "I fear the tunnels beneath us may one day swallow the whole house," wrote. These letters gave voice to those long-past miners, cooks, school teachers, the tailor who lost his leg, the preacher whose sermon was interrupted by the arrival of the rail line. Their stories emerged like specters from the mud and stone. But what happened to Millhaven in those decades before the floodwaters came? What was life like when the town first began to fall apart? In the early 1920s, the copper had grown scarce. The ore veins thinned. The silver content dropped. Milling costs soared. Prices on the global market slumped. World War I demanded metals, but by 1920, supply was glutted. Demand dropped after small producers couldn't compete with giant firms. Mine owners folded, the employment vanished, the schoolhouse closed, traders left, women followed husbands or fathers, children were boarded out or sent to distant relatives. Some families refused to leave. They stayed until their homes crumbled. They scavenged bricks. They painted over peeling wood to keep doors shut from the desert wind. They buried what they couldn't carry. Over time, roofs collapsed, floors rotted, the wind blew dust through walls. The desert reclaimed stones, sand filled cellar holes. Those last years had a haunting quality. Imagine twilight in Millhaven in 1923, sunset blazing red behind mesas. The howl of the wind through empty window frames, the hollow echo of footsteps on abandoned porch, maybe a stray dog or two. A torn dress fluttering on a fence post. Windows dim with dusk and dust, and in some homes, still a candle at night. Someone, whatever held on to hope, still lived. Then the floodwaters came. Gradually, quietly, as dusk turned to night, water crept in gullies, seeped into foundations, climbed walls. The cemetery, on a hillside, got its feet wet first. Crypts submerged, trees drowned. Pets' bones lay beneath. Tools rusted. The reservoir covered it all. The water's glare made the town vanish again. The silence deepened. For decades, nothing stirred, until drought. By 1962, Millhaven was no longer submerged. The waterline retreated below the crest of the dam. Dry land returned. The townsite rose like a phantom. Foundations cracked open to air, wood warped by alternate soak and dry. Doors hung on hinges so rusted they dropped. Homes and sides revealed. Children's blocks, rusted kettles, bits of fabric cemented to wood. Journalists published photos, skeletal trees, ghost houses, items half buried. Tourists walked through what once were streets. Some cried, others photographed. A boy held up a rusted horseshoe. A woman kneeled by the schoolhouse, reading the names of one's friends, engraved in the rotting blackboards. Yet, as with all resurrections, this one was fragile. A storm could wash mud over the site again. A fire could sweep through the dry remains. Time and weather were reclaiming what had briefly returned. The sun baked the timbers, winter frost cracked the stones. Then, the rains of late 1962 returned. Fall storms brought monsoon season in early September. Clouds heavier than usual gathered over the mountains. Thunder rolled. Lightning fractured the sky. The reservoir began to refill. Millhaven's edges blurred. The street submerged once more. Walls dissolved underwater. The standing house, the Harper's porch, collapsed in the rising current. And just as suddenly as it had re-emerged, Millhaven slipped beneath the waves again. All that remained for people now were photographs, memories, drawings, the stories collected in archives. The letters Clara Evans had written, the names carved in headstones. Yet the brief resurgence of Millhaven did something unexpected. It stirred memory. It forced people to ask what is lost, what belongs to those who have gone, what stories are erased by water or by neglect. In the years that followed, efforts began to memorialize Millhaven. A plaque at the dam's visitor center, oral history projects, schoolchildren interviewing elders. A small museum opened in a nearby town displaying rusted tools, shards of glass, a child's toy car, and sometimes when the lake is low enough, you can still see chimney bricks, the bent track at the loading platform, a tombstone peeking just above the waterline. Millhaven returned and then receded. But its echo remains. Millhaven returned, only to vanish once again. All that remains are a few photographs, a few memories, and the stories that sleep beneath the water. But one thing is certain, some towns never truly die, and Millhaven was one of them. If you love stories like this, subscribe to Whisper from History, where every video brings a new story, a new soul, and a new mystery waiting to be uncovered. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't miss our Unsolved Paranormal Events playlist, because the next mystery might be hiding right next to your town.